It was a peaceful morning on Earth. Cities were bustling with activity as people went about their daily routines. Technology had advanced, and humanity had achieved a level of prosperity that many had once thought impossible. There were no wars, no famine, no major threats. The future looked bright for the people of Earth. But that morning, something changed. In the sky above, something strange appeared. At first, it was a small speck, no bigger than a bird. People hardly noticed it. But soon, that speck grew larger, stretching across the sky, blocking out the sun. It was massive, far bigger than any airplane, any spacecraft humanity had ever built. And it wasn't the only one. Across the globe, people stopped in their tracks, staring up at the sky. In every country, every city, on every continent, people saw the same thing: gigantic ships slowly descending from the atmosphere. They were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Sleek, metallic, and completely silent, the ships hovered in place as if waiting for something. At first, there was confusion. What was this? Was it a new kind of aircraft? Some kind of test from an unknown government? But then the fear set in. These ships were far too advanced for anything Earth's scientists or military had created, and there was no sign of any human markings or symbols. This was no accident. These were not from Earth. Panic spread like wildfire. Phones rang, emergency broadcasts crackled on the airwaves, and cities filled with people running in all directions. Governments scrambled to understand what was happening. But there was no answer. The ships were silent, and they showed no sign of movement, except for their descent. In the middle of a quiet park in New York City, Mark Thompson looked up. He was enjoying his morning walk when the strange sight first caught his attention. The sun was hidden behind the shadow of a massive craft, casting a dark cloud over the city. He squinted against the bright light, trying to make sense of it. His first thought was that it was some kind of military exercise. But as the minutes passed and more ships appeared in the sky, the realization hit him: this wasn't something man-made. He wasn't alone in his disbelief. A crowd began to form around him, staring up in awe and fear. No one spoke. They were too stunned to move, their eyes fixed on the ships that now loomed over them. The sky was filled with their enormous presence. Back at the Pentagon, officials were already hard at work. Generals, scientists, and government leaders were gathered in a high-security room, eyes glued to the screens as data poured in from satellites and military radar systems. The ships were still descending, and the reports were clear. They weren't just hovering. They were heading straight for Earth's major cities. "This is not a drill," General Hayes said, his voice low and serious. "We need to be ready for anything. Prepare our forces for potential engagement." As the world's governments began to take action, the ships continued their slow descent. In London, Paris, Moscow, and Tokyo, people watched from their windows, wondering the same thing. Who are they? What do they want? Then it happened. The silence that had settled over the world was broken by a loud, low hum, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ships began to emit a strange energy, a glowing light that pulsated from their hulls. It wasn't an explosion, more like a wave of energy that washed over everything in its path. In every city, from the largest to the smallest, there was a sudden power outage. Lights flickered and went dark. Computers shut down. The hum of modern technology ceased, leaving nothing but the eerie quiet of an unsettled world. The people were terrified. Had the aliens just shut down their world? Or worse, was this the first step of an invasion? No one knew. The silence that followed the wave of energy was deafening. It felt as though the Earth itself had been frozen in time. People held their breath, waiting for something more to happen. But the ships didn't land. They didn't attack. They just hung in the sky, their lights flashing intermittently. The authorities were at a loss for words. Military forces were mobilized, but there was no clear strategy. What could they do? These ships were unlike anything they had ever encountered, and they had no idea what the aliens wanted or why they were here. In the small town of Riverton, a group of friends gathered in a living room, watching the events unfold on television. Sarah, who had always been fascinated by space and alien life, was the first to speak. "It's happening," she whispered. "They're here." Her friends exchanged nervous glances. None of them could have ever imagined this day would come. Aliens. Invasion. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie, but this was no movie. It was real, and it was happening now. The world held its breath. The ships continued to hover, their purpose still unknown. Were they here to conquer? To communicate? Or was it something else? The questions piled up, and the fear grew as humanity realized that this was just the beginning. As the hours passed, the ships made no further move. They just floated there, massive and silent, casting a shadow over the earth. But everyone knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. The world had changed in the blink of an eye. People everywhere stared at the skies, unable to comprehend what was happening. The alien ships were still suspended above Earth's cities, massive and unmoving, as if they were watching humanity from above. The air felt thick with fear and uncertainty. In every major city, governments began to scramble. Emergency response teams were activated, military forces were put on high alert, and scientists gathered to analyze the strange phenomenon. But no one had any answers. The ship's technology was far beyond anything Earth had ever seen, and there were no signs of communication or movement from the invaders. Inside the Pentagon, General Hayes stood in front of a group of military leaders, his face grim. The situation was beyond anything they had prepared for. "We need to be ready for anything," General Hayes said, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "Get our forces mobilized, and get me a direct line to the president. Now." His orders were clear, but the reality was far from simple. Earth's military forces had never faced anything like this before. Satellites, radar systems, and weaponry were all useless against the mysterious ships hovering above. Even their most advanced fighter jets were no match for these invaders. Across the ocean, in Moscow, Russia's leadership was equally panicked. President Viktor Ivanov paced back and forth in his war room, watching the live feeds from every major city on Earth. The ships were everywhere. Russia's military was ready for conventional warfare, but this was something entirely different. His communications with other world leaders had been cut off. There was no way to coordinate a global response. "What are they waiting for?" President Ivanov muttered, staring at the screen. "Why aren't they attacking?" He wasn't alone in his confusion. People around the world were wondering the same thing. The silence from the alien ships was deafening. Why hadn't they made their move yet? What did they want? Back in New York City, Mark Thompson watched the news on his phone, trying to piece together what little information was available. Like everyone else, he had heard the warnings of invasion from movies and books, but never in his life had he imagined it would become reality. "This is insane," Mark said under his breath, his hands shaking. The streets were crowded with people who shared the same sense of disbelief. Sirens blared in the distance, police and military vehicles rushed by, and yet there was no clear answer as to what was happening. Everyone felt like they were trapped in a nightmare. Some people tried to flee, while others stayed in place, glued to their televisions and phones, waiting for some sign of what to do next. Inside the military command center in Washington, D.C., there was no plan. There couldn't be. How could Earth fight an enemy it knew nothing about? Their weapons had no effect. Their fighter jets couldn't reach the alien ships. The government had no idea what the invaders were capable of. "We've got nothing," Lieutenant Roberts said, slamming his fist on the table in frustration. "Our technology doesn't even scratch them." General Hayes nodded, a cold sweat on his brow. "We need more time. If we can't communicate, we need to figure out how to engage." Across the world, the situation was the same: panic, confusion, and uncertainty. People feared the worst. that Earth's civilization was about to be wiped out, that the invaders would land and take over. Humanity had no way of knowing what the aliens wanted, but all signs pointed to the possibility of an invasion. And yet, even as the world descended into chaos, the ships above Earth did nothing. They remained still, watching, waiting. It wasn't until late afternoon that the first signs of aggression came. In Paris, one of the ships suddenly activated a low-frequency energy beam. The ground shook as the beam shot toward the Earth's surface, and a large section of the city was instantly plunged into darkness. Buildings were destroyed in an instant, but the ship did not land. It merely hovered in place, continuing to scan the city below. "What was that?" one of the soldiers on the ground asked, his voice trembling. "It's a warning," another replied. "They're showing us their power, but they haven't even begun to attack." The energy pulse had left a massive crater in the center of Paris. And yet, the alien ship remained high in the sky. It wasn't just a show of strength, it was a message. A message that they were capable of destroying everything in an instant, but they were choosing not to. In London, similar events occurred. A series of energy pulses were sent out, cutting off power to the entire city and causing widespread panic. It was clear now. The aliens weren't here just to observe. They had come with a purpose, and that purpose was to dominate. In Washington, D.C., the president addressed the nation for the first time since the ships appeared. "My fellow citizens," President Edwards began, his voice strong despite the fear in his eyes. "We are facing a threat unlike anything we have ever known. But we will stand together. We will fight." His words did little to calm the public. People didn't know what to believe. The military was in disarray, and the alien invaders were showing no signs of mercy. As night fell, the situation grew more desperate. The skies remained filled with the dark shadows of the alien ships, casting an eerie glow over the cities below. People looked to the heavens, waiting for an answer, but all they received was silence. The question lingered in the minds of everyone on Earth: what did the invaders want? And how long would it be before they made their next move? The world had spent days in shock, unsure of what to do next. The alien ships hovered silently over the Earth's major cities, their intentions still unclear. Governments scrambled to prepare, but nothing seemed to be enough. No one knew how to fight what they could not understand. Humanity was on the brink of panic. Then, just when it seemed like Earth might be doomed, something unexpected happened. A hidden force, long forgotten, began to stir. It all started with an old, secret military research facility buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. The facility, located in a remote part of the world, had been abandoned decades ago, its purpose lost to time. Inside, no one had ever fully understood what was stored there. It was a place of secrets, a place where no one dared to venture. But when the alien ships arrived, something in the facility began to wake up. It started with a strange hum, like the low sound of machinery coming to life. At first, it was barely noticeable, an odd vibration in the air. But then, as the days passed, the hum grew louder, more distinct, until it could no longer be ignored. Dr. Evelyn Carter, the leading scientist working with the global military forces, was one of the first to notice it. She had been analyzing data from the alien ships when a strange signal appeared on her screen. It was coming from the abandoned facility. "What is this?" she muttered to herself, staring at the coordinates on her map. The signal was unlike anything she had ever seen, an energy pulse, but not from the aliens. No, this was something human, something buried deep beneath the Earth. Unable to resist, Dr. Carter immediately contacted the Global Military Command and arranged for a team to investigate the site. With everything else happening around the world, they knew this might be their only hope. The alien strength seemed insurmountable, but if there was a chance that Earth had a weapon hidden away, it was worth investigating. The team arrived at the facility, unsure of what they would find. The entrance was hidden in the mountains, far from prying eyes, and the area had been sealed off for decades. But with the alien ships still hovering in the sky, time was running out. As they entered the facility, the air was thick with dust and silence. Old, rusted doors creaked open as they moved deeper into the underground structure. The walls were lined with strange, unfamiliar technology. It looked advanced, even by today's standards, but also old, like it had been built by another time, another era. Dr. Carter's eyes widened as they reached a central chamber. At the heart of the room was an enormous machine, its purpose unclear. It was humming now, louder than ever, as if responding to their presence. The walls of the chamber were covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly, and as they moved closer, the air seemed to buzz with energy. "What is this place?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice filled with awe. "I'm not sure," Dr. Carter replied, her eyes scanning the complex machinery. "But whatever it is, it's powered up. It's responding to something out there." The hum grew even louder, and suddenly, the machine came to life. Massive arms extended from the sides of the structure, reaching up toward the ceiling. The walls shifted, and what appeared to be a massive portal began to open in the center of the room. At that moment, everyone in the room felt it. A rush of energy, a sudden surge of power that seemed to course through the entire facility. Dr. Carter's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The machine wasn't just powering up, it was activating something much greater. "We have to go now," one of the soldiers shouted, but it was too late. The machine roared to life, sending out a wave of energy that shot up toward the surface. A pulse of light shot through the ground, reaching toward the skies, and for the first time, the alien ships above seemed to react. They began to shift, their movement subtle at first, but then more pronounced. The ships above Earth seemed to pulse in response to the energy below. It was as if they were communicating, or perhaps responding to the power that had just awakened. In the military command center, the data came in fast and furious. Global satellite systems tracked the strange pulse of energy, and immediately, a link between the facility's activation and the alien ships was suspected. "They felt it," General Hayes said, his voice tight with urgency. "Whatever this is, the aliens know about it now. They're reacting. We need to figure out what we've just unleashed." But Dr. Carter wasn't sure if they had unleashed something dangerous or something that could save them. She didn't know if the machine was meant for war or peace. All she knew was that Earth had just awakened a force that might change the course of their survival. "We don't have much time," she said. "If this technology is connected to the alien forces, we need to understand it before they do." The race was on. The world was on the edge of its seat, unsure of whether the force humanity had just awoken would be their salvation or their doom. With the alien ships still hovering ominously above Earth, it was clear that the next move would be decisive. In every corner of the world, the question echoed in the minds of all. What had humanity just activated? And would it be enough to stop the alien threat? The pulse of energy that had rippled through the Earth's surface didn't go unnoticed. The alien ships, which had been silent and still, now began to move, their vast, metallic bodies shifting in the sky. The quiet tension that had settled over the planet for days seemed to grow thicker as Earth's hidden force awakened. Across the globe, the world held its breath. From the small villages to the bustling cities, everyone stared upward, wondering if this new development would mean salvation or destruction. The alien ships, which had once hung motionless in the sky, were now reacting. Humanity had just unleashed something that caused them to stir. In the Pentagon, General Hayes paced back and forth. He had seen the satellite images. The ships were shifting, pulsing in response to the energy wave. It was a subtle movement at first, almost as if they were testing the power beneath them, but the signs were clear. They were not idle anymore. "They're not just observing anymore," General Hayes said, staring at the live feed. "They're preparing for something." His words echoed in the command center, where officials and military experts scrambled to make sense of the situation. The alien ships weren't like anything humanity had encountered before. They had been unmoving and silent. Until now, the question on everyone's mind was simple. What did this mean? On the other side of the world, in the underground facility where Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team had activated the hidden technology, the atmosphere was tense. The ground had shaken when the energy waves surged upward, and the strange hum of the ancient machine had turned into a roar. But even as the machine powered up, the team wasn't sure whether it was helping or making things worse. "We've triggered something," Dr. Carter muttered, her eyes glued to the monitors as data poured in from every corner of the globe. "The ships are responding. But to what exactly?" Her team stood in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. They had no answers, only more questions. But one thing was certain: the alien ships above Earth were no longer passive observers. They had come to life, as if the energy surge had ignited a new phase in their mission. Across the world, the situation was growing more urgent. In London, Paris, and Moscow, the skies were now filled with movement. The alien ships began to circle, their sleek forms darting across the sky at speeds that no human craft could match. They weren't attacking yet, but it was clear they were preparing for something. "What are they doing?" a military officer in Moscow asked, watching the monitors as the ships moved in perfect formation, each one synchronized with the others. The answer came quickly. A low hum filled the air, and in an instant, a brilliant beam of light shot down from one of the ships. It wasn't an energy pulse like before, but a focused, concentrated attack. The beam hit the ground with such force that it tore through buildings and sent shockwaves rippling outward. It was as if the aliens were testing Earth's defenses, probing for weaknesses. "They're attacking," shouted one of the officers in Washington, his voice filled with alarm. The streets of New York City erupted into chaos as the beam slammed into a nearby skyscraper. The building crumbled, sending dust and debris into the streets. People screamed as they ran for cover, unsure of what to do. There was no defense against this kind of power. The aliens had proven their strength, and humanity was left helpless. The alien ships did not stop. The beam continued to strike the ground with precision, hitting military bases, communication hubs, and other critical targets across the globe. Each strike seemed calculated, as though the aliens were attempting to disable Earth's ability to respond. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Carter's voice crackled through the radio. "We need to understand what we've activated. The energy surge, it's connecting us with them in some way. They're targeting specific locations, and it's not random. We might be able to reverse it, but we need time." General Hayes took a deep breath, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. "Time is something we don't have, Dr. Carter. We need answers now, before they destroy everything." The alien ships above Earth continued their relentless attack. They were efficient, methodical, seemingly without emotion, without mercy. It was as though they were sending a message. "This world belongs to us now." But as the alien forces wreaked havoc, something unexpected happened. The energy pulse that had activated Earth's hidden machine began to intensify. The machines beneath the ground seemed to hum with power once again, almost as though they were responding to the alien assault. "What's happening?" one of the soldiers asked, staring at the monitor that tracked the energy signature from the underground facility. "I think it's reacting to the attack," Dr. Carter answered, her voice trembling with realization. "The force we've awakened. It's not just a weapon, it's a defense system, a force that might be able to stop them." The aliens had underestimated humanity. The ancient technology buried deep within Earth wasn't just a weapon for war. It was a shield, a protector waiting to be awakened. Dr. Carter wasn't sure if it could stop the alien invasion, but it was their only hope. But the aliens weren't giving up that easily. The ships above Earth continued their assault, and as the energy from the ground grew stronger, the air crackled with tension. The two forces, one ancient, one alien, were locked in a silent battle, each testing the other's strength. The world waited. Would the ancient force hidden beneath the Earth be enough to repel the invaders, Or was this just the beginning of the end for humanity? The world watched in fear as the alien ships continued their devastating assault. The beams of energy shot down from the sky, tearing through cities, military bases, and power grids with terrifying precision. Humanity seemed powerless against the alien invaders, and the fear of extinction loomed large. Yet, in the shadows, something far more ancient stirred, waiting to reveal its true power. Inside the underground facility, Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team were working furiously to understand the energy signature from the ancient machine they had activated. They had no time to waste. The alien ships were growing bolder in their attacks, and Earth's military forces were unable to hold them back. The pulse from the machine had only intensified in the wake of the alien onslaught, almost as if the two forces were feeding off one another. "The power's growing stronger," Dr. Carter said, staring at the data on her screen. The symbols on the walls of the underground facility had begun to glow brighter, and the humming noise in the room had become deafening. She wasn't sure if the growing energy was a sign of success or a harbinger of disaster, but one thing was certain: the power from this ancient technology was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. It wasn't just energy. It was something deeper, something more connected to Earth itself. "I think it's a weapon," Dr. Carter whispered, almost to herself. "But not in the way we think. It's not just meant to fight. It's meant to defend. To protect Earth from forces like this." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Could this long-forgotten technology really be the key to saving the planet? And if so, why had it been buried beneath the Earth for so long? Back on the surface, the alien ships had intensified their attacks. Major cities lay in ruins, and millions of people were fleeing for their lives. Yet, despite their overwhelming firepower, the aliens still hadn't fully engaged their forces. It was as though they were waiting for something, testing humanity, probing Earth's defenses. In Washington, D.C., President Edwards sat at the helm of the crisis, trying to make sense of everything. Reports were flooding in from every corner of the globe. Chaos had erupted in nearly every city. The world was teetering on the edge of collapse, and the military was at a loss. There was no strategy, no plan that seemed to make any difference. "We're losing control," one of his advisors said, his voice shaking. "The aliens are too powerful. We're fighting a battle we can't win." But then, as if answering the call, a sudden pulse of energy rippled through the air. It wasn't the familiar energy beams from the alien ships, but something different, a force that came from deep beneath the ground. It spread out like a shockwave, pushing through the atmosphere, and for a brief moment, everything fell silent. The alien ships halted. The air seemed to shimmer with a strange energy, and then the alien vessels began to retreat. "What's happening?" General Hayes demanded, watching the screens in disbelief. "Why are they pulling back?" The alien ships, which had been relentless in their attack, were now moving away from Earth's surface. They formed a massive formation in the sky, hovering at a distance, as if waiting for something. "I don't understand." Dr. Carter's voice crackled through the communication link. "It's the force. Whatever we activated, it's causing the aliens to retreat. They're responding to the energy. I think it's a kind of shield, a barrier they can't break through." President Edwards leaned forward, his face filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "You mean to tell me that this machine is some kind of defense?" "Yes," Dr. Carter replied, her voice shaking. "It's ancient, but I believe it was designed to protect Earth from threats like this. The aliens, they've encountered this energy before, and they're scared of it." The room fell silent as the realization hit. Earth's hidden weapon wasn't just a force of destruction. It was a force that could keep the invaders at bay. The technology that had been buried for centuries was the key to humanity's survival. But even as the aliens pulled back, it was clear they weren't done. Their ships remained above Earth, circling and waiting. Their retreat wasn't a defeat. It was a temporary pause. The aliens were regrouping, recalibrating, preparing for their next move. "We've bought some time," General Hayes said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "But we don't know how long it will last. We need to figure out how to use this energy, how to turn it into a weapon that can destroy them, not just keep them away." As night fell over the war-torn cities, the world held its breath. The alien ships may have backed off, but their presence still loomed large in the sky. The question was no longer about surviving the invasion. It was about defeating it. And the ancient weapon Earth had just awoken might be humanity's only hope. In the underground facility, Dr. Carter looked down at the screen once more. The power was still growing, and with it came the realization that the key to saving Earth might be more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The weapon beneath the Earth was a double-edged sword, capable of both defense and destruction. Could humanity control it in time? The battle had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. The brief retreat of the alien ships left the Earth in a state of eerie silence. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had a glimmer of hope. The energy pulse from the hidden machine had forced the alien ships to halt their relentless attacks. But even as the aliens withdrew, the sense of urgency only intensified. The world watched in disbelief as the alien ships lingered above Earth, their dark forms circling in the sky like vultures, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The time humanity had bought was precious, but it was running out. The question was no longer about surviving. The real challenge now was to defeat the alien invaders for good. In the Pentagon, General Hayes stood before a map of the Earth, his mind racing. The alien ships were still out there, hovering above the planet, and it was clear they were recalibrating their attack. The pulse of energy from the hidden facility had worked. For now. But the aliens had adapted quickly. Humanity had no idea how long this shield would last. "We need a plan," General Hayes said, his voice firm. "We've bought time, but we can't just sit and wait for the aliens to come back stronger. We need to strike." Back in the underground facility, Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team were poring over the data from the mysterious machine they had activated. The symbols on the walls continued to glow brighter, and the hum of energy in the air was almost overwhelming. They knew the force could be used to defend Earth, but how? And could they wield this ancient power in time to turn the tide of the invasion? "We need to figure out how to weaponize this energy," Dr. Carter said, her voice steady, but filled with determination. "We have the shield, but we need to strike back." Her words echoed in the minds of the team. The situation had become clear. The machine beneath the Earth wasn't just a defense, it was a weapon. A weapon that could possibly destroy the alien invaders, but only if they understood how to unlock its true potential. As the team worked tirelessly to decipher the machine's technology, the alien ships began to regroup. Above Earth, the ships were now sending out test pulses of energy, probing the invisible barrier that had kept them at bay. The attacks were subtle, but they were growing stronger by the minute. It was clear the aliens were trying to find a way through the energy field, or worse, trying to disable it. General Hayes, still on the front lines of the global military response, received the news from Dr. Carter's team. The shield was holding, but only just. The aliens were learning, adapting to Earth's new defense. The next assault would be far more calculated, and the shield might not survive a full-scale attack. "We can't afford to wait," General Hayes said, his voice laced with urgency. "We need to hit them while they're vulnerable." Dr. Carter, her face lit by the glow of the data screen, looked up at the team. "We have to strike first." It was a risky decision. The technology was ancient, and the team still didn't fully understand it. But there was no other choice. The military forces, working in tandem with Dr. Carter's team, made their decision. They would take the fight to the aliens, using the energy they had just unlocked as their weapon. In the heart of the underground facility, the massive machine roared to life once again. The walls shook as the force within it grew stronger. The energy that had once been a shield now began to take on a new form, a weapon. Power surged through the facility's core, and Dr. Carter's eyes widened as she realized what they had unlocked. This was it, The key to defeating the alien invaders. "It's working," she said breathlessly. "We have a weapon." The power from the machine flowed outward, not as a pulse of energy, but as a concentrated beam of force, a force that could be aimed, controlled, and unleashed. The technology was ancient, but it was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. And now, it was humanity's best chance at survival. On the surface, military forces were preparing for the counterattack. Fighter jets, tanks, and ground forces were being mobilized, ready to take action the moment the signal was given. But all eyes were on the sky, where the alien ships still hovered, their dark shapes casting a shadow over the earth below. As the countdown began, the tension was unbearable. Everyone knew that the outcome of this next move could change everything. Would humanity's new weapon be enough to push back the aliens once and for all? General Hayes stood before his officers, his face set with grim determination. "This is it. We fight back now, or we risk losing everything." The first strike came from the ground. A massive beam of energy shot upward from the facility, cutting through the atmosphere and slamming into one of the alien ships. The impact was immediate and devastating. The ship shuddered, its metal frame cracking under the force of the beam. It began to spiral, unable to regain control, and crashed into the ocean below with an explosion that sent waves crashing against the shore. It worked. One of the soldiers shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. The first alien ship had been destroyed, but the others were still hovering above, unyielding. Yet the victory was short-lived. The remaining ships began to glow with a bright, eerie light. They were preparing for retaliation. The first ship had been taken down, but the aliens weren't going to surrender easily. The battle was far from over. As the alien ships regrouped, the pulse of energy from the underground facility surged again. This time, the beam was even stronger, more concentrated. Dr. Carter's team had learned how to amplify the energy, how to focus it on the alien ships. The world was on edge as the energy beam from Earth's ancient weapon cut through the skies, destroying one of the alien ships. It had been a moment of triumph for humanity, a rare glimmer of hope in the midst of the chaos. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining alien ships remained hovering above Earth, and they were now preparing to retaliate. General Hayes watched the live feed of the alien ships. Despite the destruction they had caused, despite the loss of one of their own, the aliens didn't seem to be retreating. If anything, their presence in the sky grew more ominous. They were readying for something larger, something far more destructive. They weren't going to leave Earth without a fight. They'll come back stronger. We can't let them take another step, General Hayes said, his voice low but filled with determination. The tension in the command room was palpable. They had won the first battle, but the war wasn't over. Back in the underground facility, Dr. Carter and her team were working faster than ever. The energy from the ancient machine had been turned into a weapon, but it wasn't perfect. The beam had taken down one ship, but the aliens' power was far greater. Their ships had defensive shields, advanced weaponry, and an unknown level of technology. We need to amplify the weapon. Dr. Carter's voice echoed through the facility as she directed her team to reconfigure the energy system. The machine had proven its potential, but now it needed to become humanity's true weapon, capable of defeating the remaining alien forces. The ground rumbled beneath their feet as the hum of the machine grew louder. The energy surged, filling the facility with a bright, blinding light. Dr. Carter watched, her heart racing. This was it. They didn't have time for experiments. The weapon needed to be perfect, or they would lose everything. At the same time, the alien ships began to descend. Their attack was imminent. The remaining fleet hovered over major cities, their weapons primed and ready to fire. Humanity was facing its most desperate hour. The alien ships weren't just testing Earth's defenses anymore. They were preparing to wipe out everything in their path. We have to fire now, General Hayes shouted over the communication line, his eyes scanning the skies. The first ship had fallen, but the others were still there, circling like vultures. They wouldn't wait for humanity to regroup. At that moment, the energy from the underground facility surged one final time. Dr. Carter's voice crackled through the comms. The weapon is ready. It's now or never. The military forces, stationed across the globe, were ready. Fighter jets, armed with everything they had, flew in formation, preparing to launch their strike. On the ground, soldiers watched the skies, holding their breath, waiting for the signal. And then it came. From deep beneath the earth, a massive beam of energy shot up, streaking through the atmosphere like a comet. It hit the nearest alien ship, not with a pulse or a flare, but with concentrated force, a beam that cut through their shield like paper. The alien ship staggered as the beam tore through its hull, and within seconds, it exploded in a fiery burst, its remnants scattering across the sky. "It worked," shouted one of the soldiers, unable to believe their eyes. The first ship was gone, but the remaining aliens weren't done yet. They had begun their retaliation. The alien ships fired back with devastating force, their weapons lighting up the sky in an explosion of energy. Cities across the globe were once again under attack. The battle for Earth was reaching its boiling point. But humanity wasn't backing down. The underground machine, now fully powered and honed, released another beam. This time, it was even more powerful, wider, and faster. It shot through the sky, colliding with a second alien ship. The alien vessel tried to maneuver, but the beam tracked its movement, striking it down in midair. Another explosion. "Two down," General Hayes shouted, his eyes scanning the skies. The aliens had lost two of their ships, but the remaining ships were still formidable. They were adapting to humanity's newfound weapon, adjusting their tactics. Yet, with every alien ship they destroyed, Earth's forces grew more confident. Humanity's resistance had turned from helplessness to hope. Dr. Carter had unlocked something ancient, something powerful, something the aliens hadn't expected. As the alien ships regrouped for one final strike, the sky darkened with the threat of their last assault. But this time, humanity was ready. Fighter jets swooped in, launching their missiles, while the energy weapon from the ground fired once more. This time, it wasn't just one ship. The beam spread across the sky, hitting multiple alien ships simultaneously. The ships fell, one by one, as the energy from the ancient machine tore through their defenses. Explosions lit up the horizon, and the last remaining ships began to break apart, their technology no match for Earth's new weapon. As the final alien ship disintegrated in the sky, a loud cheer erupted from the soldiers below. General Hayes stood tall, staring up at the sky, as if waiting for any sign that the battle wasn't truly over. But the ships had stopped. The invaders were defeated. Humanity had won. The cost had been high. Cities lay in ruins. Millions had lost their lives. But Earth had triumphed. The weapon that had been dormant for centuries had saved them. Dr. Carter's discovery had turned the tide, and the alien invaders had underestimated the power of the human spirit. "We did it," Dr. Carter whispered, her voice filled with awe. "We really did it." The world, though battered and scarred, began to rebuild. The final battle had been won, but it was just the beginning of a new era for Earth. An era where humanity had learned to fight back against the impossible, and where the ancient weapon beneath their feet had saved them from certain destruction. But as the survivors began to look forward, one thought lingered in the air. There was still so much about the ancient technology they had unlocked that they didn't understand. And if the aliens had found it once, who was to say they wouldn't come again? The battle for Earth was over for now. But the questions remained, and humanity would be ready, standing united against any force that dared to threaten their world again.